I would like to tell you a story that I wrote a while ago. It's not finished, and it's not really amazing. I just think it's kind of neat, and I don't think I'm really gonna do with it anything with it. So I'd rather share it than not share it. So this will probably become a new kind of thing that I do because I write a lot, but like I don't really ever do anything with the writing. So I think I'll just start reading them to you. So here we go. This first story is called The Inversion. Somewhere in the middle of a city, a massive tower was erected. Yet, it wasn't as other towers were. This tower had but one level over ground. Looked like a little shack. The rest of it was underground, so ginormous it reached to the center of the earth. It was made of a material known as waston, a metal more precious and durable than tungsten and diamond combined. It held an iridescent quality to it when naturally found as an ore, but when refined, it retained a more crimson sheen. The atoms holding it together are so tightly packed that no one has ever seen something quite like it. No pressure could compress it any further, and somehow the builders of this building somehow came to possession of tons and tons of it to build this building. It makes sense, though. It's the only known material that can withstand the pressures of the center of the Earth. I had read a story about some people making submarines out of this stuff and racing to see what was at the bottom of the Marianas Trench, but being sad to see that it was just more sand. One day, as the story goes, two scientists were down at the bottom level of the building, marveling at the Earth's core, when one knocked the other out. When the other woke up, he looked through the glass floor separating them in the core, and the glass infused with Waston, the core shining brightly as ever, like a baby star. And the second thing his eyes landed on was his partner, strapped to the building, holding a strange gun and wearing an anti-pressure suit made of Waston. The scientist pressed up to the window and tried to talk to his partner, but he wouldn't listen. He aimed the strange device at the core of the Earth and fired. Just before the substance as exiting the gun fired towards the core, the scientist caught a glimpse of the blue iridescent quality of the compound had that the compound had. It was another recent scientific discovery called Jafarianium. Jafarianium. Its properties and effects were still unknown, but his partner was firing a high, concentrated dosage at the center of the Earth, and he was the main researcher of the substance, so he must have known something the other scientists hadn't yet. The compound flew into the core, assisted by gravity, and changed something fundamental about the core. It grew misshapen. Scientists watched as the fiery ball convulsed, shrunk, grew, and the undulating mass was unpredictable at best, until it settled into a fiery cube sitting midair in the massive cavernous space which it inhabited. Once yellowish orange, now a deep turquoise. So deep you could fall into the shade. And before they knew it, the scientists were falling. But they didn't meet the floor as was normal at the end of their free fall. They met the ceiling. The other scientist came back into the laboratory, stripping free from the helmet as he did so, and he helped the scientist inside up off his back. Both in awe, they set aside their gripes to take in the current situation they had landed in. They were standing on the ceiling, looking up at the glass floor they had once been standing on, at the cubic formation before them. They felt the tower shift. The roof beneath them shifted ever so slightly. The tower was falling out of the ground and into the sky. 2 minutes previously, the population of the world was a staggering 8 billion people, and I was sitting at a bus stop. When I felt myself free falling, instinctually, I tried to grab hold of something, grabbing the lamppost just before flying past it. Confused, I looked to the ground above me, and thankfully I was wearing headphones. I got to miss the screams as I watched everyone nearby fly into the endless bright blue void above. The lucky ones were under roofs or inside. If you weren't, you'd better hope you got a really good grip on the grass beneath you. 2 minutes before the gravity inverted, the population of the world was a staggering 8 billion. Now 4 billion are currently occupying space. Now, 4 years later, we live in sprawling underground tunnels. The story of how all this came to have. Oh my god. The story of how this all came to be having made its way to everyone over time. The bodies that were sent into space have formed a ring around Earth, like Saturn's debris, forever reminding any who look down into the void of the sky of that unfortunate day. Recently, people have installed monkey bars all of sorts all over what used to be the ground, and people have started strapping themselves to the ground in an effort to tan in the sunlight. People's appearances really mean a lot to them, huh? I once considered doing it myself. I've been getting quite pale recently. After all, we've been hiding underground for years, but my want to do so was killed when one day I was climbing overground and caught sight of some broken straps nearby. That kind of rid the thought from my mind. The main junction of my town's sprawling subterranean village is the hole to the center of the earth, the under tower, now almost entirely above ground, only connected via cables made of Waston holding it to the surface. Even with cables made of the strongest material ever, it's a very unsteady thing to even think of traversing. The scientists watched above them as the core got further and farther away, listening to the tower walls scrape violently against the cavern walls just outside. "What the fuck did you just do?" the first scientist said, still trying to process all that had occurred. "I altered the core of the Earth. I thought it would lower the gravity slightly, and I knew you wouldn't let me try anything, so I felt I needed to take the opportunity in my own hands. But this effect was unforeseen. Clearly," the second scientist said, still wearing the Waston armor. The two took in around their s- the two took in their surroundings. Their equipment had flown to the roof just as they had. They looked for anything that could be of use to them, but before they could lay down, the scientist said. The first one was just about to question it when he looked up again. The walls around them had turned from magma to solid rock to ore. Oh my god, I fucked that up. The first one was about to question it when he looked up again. The walls around them had turned from magma and solid rock and ore to being mixed rocks and dirt. They had assumed that they would just fly into space, but they saw the Waston cables holding the tower in place about to run out of slack. The two scientists laid down and braced for impact. When you're in an elevator crashing down to the bottom floor, what do? Most may say to jump when you think you're nearing the end, and sure that might work, unless you're falling so fast that you leave the ground and just smash into the floor. Or you jump into the wrong time and get smashed by the ceiling. Some might say to stand up and just hope for the best, or to do a handstand, but doing either of those things leads to, at best, major injuries. At worst, gives you a slow death because of said injuries. No, you're supposed to lay down flat as you can on the ground. So the possible damage is spread through your whole body instead of just focused on specific parts. The same principle applies to the situation of the doctors. They were in an indestructible crimson elevator that was plummeting towards the bottom floor when those cables ran out of slack. And there was no emergency button. They had to save themselves, so they laid down and waited for the impact. When it came, it blew the wind out of both of them, clearly. A sudden, violent stop at the bottom of the largest elevator shaft on Earth. They felt the heaviness in the air. They were the only survivors of this in the building. A feeling they both shared confirmed this, and as they both lay on the ceiling, looking up into down, they came to grips with what they had truly witnessed in the past 2 minutes, and after 10 minutes or so of processing and laying winded on the ground, they got up and started escaping into a cavern near the exit door.